It's morning in Spokane. On this morning in 2011, 500,000 people call the Spokane area home. 100 years ago, an organization is formed here on an abiding principle that is still true today. No matter where one lives here or what one does here, under all is the land.
To declare Expo 74 officially open to all the citizens of the world.
Hello, I'm Tom MacArthur for the Spokane Association of Realtors. The Spokane Realty Board, as it is known in the beginning, is formed in this room in 1911, the Hall of the Doges of what was then Davenport's restaurant, now the Davenport Hotel. The story of the real estate men, as they are then called, is the story of Spokane, because each as much forms the other. Ownership of land drives development, as it has since the first real estate transaction here shortly after the American Civil War. Our story begins there, on the banks of the Spokane River, near the Great Falls. Spokane begins as a real estate transaction in 1878. James Glover, whom history celebrates as the father of Spokane, purchases most of the land around Spokane Falls under a federal land act. The President of the United States himself, Rutherford B. Hayes, signs the deed. 2 years later, in the newly formed Spokane County, the auditor records the deed at 11:40 in the morning on May 31st, 1880. This piece of paper, in the archives of the Northwest Museum of Arts and Culture, is the birth certificate for the city of Spokane. The deed says it appears that full payment has been made for the land. We don't really know how much Glover pays for the land, nor do we know how much he pays two squatters for the right to buy it, which means Spokane really starts before Glover.
It did. A couple of men by the name of J.J. Downing and Seth Scranton had come to the area in 1871. They were already starting to kind of develop that area a little bit, land on both sides of the river around the falls. So they were going to capitalize on the power at the falls. They built a little sawmill, which was water powered. And they were hopeful that this area was going to develop because the Northern Pacific Railroad was supposed to be coming to the area.
They had streets named. They had mapped the city of Spokane out far, way ahead of Glover.
The story of how Spokane gets its start is told in a new book, Spokane, Our Early History Under All is the Land, commissioned as a centennial project by the Spokane Association of Realtors. Tony and Suzanne Beaumonte, husband and wife and the region's foremost historical authors, begin their story when Scranton and Downing pound a stake into the land in 1871. Nearly a decade before Glover's deed is filed.
The big thing on this that really struck me as we started putting this thing together is not knowing we were going to do a book on real estate for the Board of Realtors. We were really surprised how often real estate played a major part in this. Spokane is about real estate. That's where a lot of people made a lot of money.
The city of Spokane Falls is incorporated in 1881 with a population of about 1,000 people. That same year, the Northern Pacific Railroad arrives and Glover literally hits pay dirt.
We've done something with the early history of Spokane that nobody has ever done. I mean, we don't write off somebody else's writings. We go to original sources. That's how we find this stuff.
The Beaumonte's sources include the diary of J.J. Downing's daughter, who writes of her family's arrival to the area 140 years ago.
Then there flashed into view, as if by magic, a scene which for beauty and grandeur was surpassed nowhere. Here lay a broad, fertile valley completely covered with waving bunch grass and surrounded by ranges of lofty mountains whose hooded peaks towering above the fleecy clouds seemed to fade away into the serene blue of the heavens. Through the valley, a river wound its snake-like course, now running smoothly and now rushing with a roar over boulders and cataracts. Babe Downing, 1871.
The pristine beauty of the land surrounding the glorious Spokane River Falls that so enchants Scranton, Downing, and Glover soon disappears. Within a decade, pioneers clear-cut all the surrounding forest and build the first city of Spokane out of wood. In 1889, 32 blocks of Spokane burned to the ground, and a modern city of Spokane is built of bricks. The word falls is dropped from the city's name in 1891. Spokane's first residential neighborhoods are developed away from the city center to avoid all the noise and the smell of a growing city. The citizens of Spokane will treat the river as a dump site and sewer for the next 100 years.
This is a Rudberg home. It was built in 19...
The home ownership rate in Spokane County is about 65%. Owning the place where you live is a key part of the American dream and gets credit for helping build the American experience.
This home was built by Lundquist.
Homeowners are more involved in their communities, they pay more taxes, they tend to be longer term employed, all of those things. But for me, fundamentally, it's about freedom. And that's why home ownership is so important in this country. And I think about those countries where you can't own land, that the government owns the land and you just get to subsist there. That's what this country is about to me. And home ownership is the #1 emblem of that to me, about what this country is and what the country was built upon. It's in the 200 and almost 50 years we've been around now.
Statistically, we know that families and children grow and mature better with stability, and home ownership provides stability. I live in a neighborhood where we have a lot of folks who live in apartments who come and go, whose children don't always know where they're going to be the next month or the next month after that. But when you own a home, you have pride in what you have.
Some policymakers back in, I think, 1913, when my understanding, the income tax was brought in, they brought in a mortgage interest deduction. And the reason for that was to incentivize people, because we all know, we all think, and we really all know that home ownership matters. Being a homeowner gives you some stability, gets you involved in your community. There are all kinds of studies out there that indicate that home ownership has a real positive impact on one's community. There's no doubt that that's been a significant thing in our growth of our cities and our communities.
A home is typically the most expensive, longest-lasting asset a person will buy. This one on Spokane's South Hill is a fine example of the Mission Revival style. It sold to its first owners in 1911 for $17,000, recently sold again for $340,000, an appreciation of 2,000%. The Rudberg House on the National Historic Register is still a viable asset after 100 years. Most people engage the help of a professional when buying or selling real estate. Arthur Jones establishes Spokane's first real estate company here in 1887. Jones is an original promoter of the Grand Coulee Dam, sells the site of Spokane's downtown post office to the government, and secures land for the Davenport Hotel. While men had most real estate companies in the early days, one woman is an exception. Alice Houghton opens her real estate company in 1889, the year of Spokane's Great Fire.
She was not considered a feminist during her era. She was not a suffragette, but she was very unique in that field because it was really a man's field. But she just kind of had a knack for it and became very involved. And of course, because of that, she had quite a high profile.
In the same year today's Monroe Street Bridge is completed, Spokane's real estate men form an association over lunch in the Hall of the Doges of Davenport's restaurant. The Spokane Realty Board is born on the 1st of September, 1911.
The association, primarily a booster organization, which will maintain its present semi-business and social form until the first annual meeting. Other matters of virtual importance to the city, such as Apple Show, Street Carnival, crops, interstate fair, railroad rate decisions, and new railroad constructions, all issues bearing directly or indirectly on Spokane's progress, will be discussed from time to time.
Members elect 40-year-old Frederick Elmendorf as the first president of the Spokane Realty Board, an association of competitive businessmen that understands cooperation is the key to their mutual success, a guiding principle that will last a century and beyond.
What amazes me is these guys got that. There were 20 of them that got together and elected Elmendorf as president, but they saw that they needed to share in order to succeed. Even then, I mean, there were 138,000 people in the Spokane area at that time, which is not a lot, but huge growth that they'd had in that decade. But those guys having that kind of vision, and somebody like him, who's quite young, a lot younger than I am at the time, really seeing that and understanding that they needed to cooperate, that couldn't have come easy. That had to be a very difficult decision and a very difficult thing to begin to build.
Elmendorf draws from his experience as the original incorporator of the Spokane Chamber of Commerce to guide the Spokane Realty Board in its first year. His leadership forever twins the work of both organizations for the growth and development of Spokane.
I have the benefit of 99 previous presidents that have built something that I'm able to carry on, and I think that's the main difference between he and I is I have all of that base to build on. He had no base. He started from scratch, but we start from scratch every day. We have a totally different market, a totally unique market that's never been here before, and we're having to build on that and build for the future.
The business of real estate can be fun and games. One of the greatest catalysts to developing Spokane's near north side is Natatorium Park, which opens as a trolley park in 1889, the year of Washington statehood. Originally, there is no reason to ride the trolley to the end of the Boone-Astor line until entrepreneurs add amusements like dancing, baseball, and carnival rides on which patrons are advised to hold their hats. Natatorium is the Latin word for pool. Natatorium Park boasts the only heated pool in the state, the largest dance floor in the city, and is the first home of Spokane's beloved Loof Carousel. Manitou Park, named in 1903, reigns as queen of Spokane parks. Its biggest attraction is not the gardens, but the zoo, which closes in 1932, a victim of the Great Depression. We honor Aubrey White, first president of the Spokane Board of Park Commissioners, as the father of Spokane parks. His legacy is one of the best park systems in the United States.
Well, I appreciate the parks. The park system was really a big deal in Spokane. Every neighborhood was designed to have a park. The very first neighborhood of Spokane, outside of the downtown community, that's where those houses where there was no real, just a couple businesses, was Brown's Addition. For 10 years, Brown and Cannon they had their own park, Coeur d'Alene Park. How did it get the name Coeur d'Alene Park? Well, most of the people that invested in Brown's Addition had got their money from the Coeur d'Alenes. That's how we got Coeur d'Alene Park. But see, that was a private park for 10 years, and then it was donated to the city.
The technology of real estate changes little in the first 100 years of the business. There are paper listings, typewriters, and copper wire telephones going back to the 1880s. These remain in use as recently as the 1980s.
The business is so much different. It is fascinating to stop and really think about it. Technology has probably is one of the big drivers, perhaps the biggest. It's certainly the association where we would have maybe 5 staff people on typewriters entering data into our database so we could then ship the information off so that they could print an MLS book. Today we have a half a person dedicated to that work. Of course, we call it broker load. The agents put in their own information, all done via the internet and that, and gee whiz, it's at your fingertips before you know it. And that's really amazing. I mean, to stop and think that twice a week we had boxes, probably 15 to 20 boxes of MLS books delivered to our back door. We had 2 vans, trucks, with drivers that would get those on Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday night, and on Thursday afternoon and Thursday night, deliver that all out to our offices. We had a print shop. Everything was printed. We don't have a print shop anymore. We have a computer lab. So that print shop moved to a computer lab because we went from the paper to cyberspace or the internet or the computer terminals. So it's been a big change. Technology has been a big change for association management and running the organization.
Realtors today do have something in common with their colleagues of a century ago, the idea of sharing listings. As far back as the 1880s, real estate agents gather at local association offices to share details on who is selling what. Today, that conversation continues online as the multiple listing service. The idea is simple. If I help you sell your property, or if you help me sell mine, we'll split the commission.
Figure this, there are some 2,000 people trying to sell homes in Spokane. And there aren't 2,000 homes always for sale. Sometimes there are, but they're the good homes. Everybody likes to try to find a buyer for that home. And that's where the multiple listing service came in. It was formed by the realtor brokers so that everybody could share everybody's listings. Think of it as if all the car dealers in town went together and they listed every car that was on every car lot in town, and every car salesman had the opportunity to go sell whatever car he wanted to whatever lot it was on, and that's how the realtors work.
The Spokane Association of Realtors is part of the National Association of Realtors, which today is the largest trade association in the United States with 1.2 million members. The National Association is founded in Chicago in 1908. It adopts a code of ethics in 1913 and begins calling its members realtors in 1916. Realtors becomes a registered trademark in 1949.
Real estate was a major enterprise in Spokane at the time. The problem they had, sometimes a piece of land would get sold 2 or 3 times to different people. There was no organization in it. Before the Board of Realtors, there were some other little boards that, eventually, they had the Board of Realtors, but to try to stop that. The big thing about the Board of Realtors, the main thing it done, and where it is today, and I was in real estate for over 12 years, and I witnessed a certain amount of this. It's designed to be fair to the buyer and the seller, both.
Dealing with the public is based on integrity, and as realtors, I can remember prior to the 70s when we had the Board of Realtors. Technically, in its infancy, there was maybe 30 to 40 companies. And a lot of the salespeople in those days, not a lot of them, but a percentage of them, enough to make it disturbing, were not treating the public right. So the Board of Realtors, as an organization, we started the education on ethics and good salesmanship and attempting to treat the public in a way that we had some respect and credibility. So I think the Board of Realtors as a whole has been a guideline for what we have today.
Buying and selling homes is an emotional event for most people. In fact, probably for everybody. And you need guidance with that. You need a rock, you need a keel, you need somebody to provide direction for that. And that's really the role that the realtor plays, is providing that trusted source for those people that are buying and selling, because they are quite caught up in emotions. You know, the saying is home is where the heart is, and people tend to lead with their hearts when they're buying and selling their homes. And so they really need somebody who is an expert, who is well informed, who has the legal training, even though we don't give legal advice, that can still provide that that role of being a trusted advisor.
One real estate transaction in Spokane history is almost as important as the founding of the city itself. Near the beginning of the Second World War, business leaders, many of them realtors, meet here in the Isabella Ballroom of the Davenport Hotel to raise money to buy a large parcel of land and give it to the federal government. After the war ends, Spokane is left with the largest employer in the Intermountain West, which continues to impact our city today.
Stars shining bright above you, night breezes seem to whisper I love you, birds sing.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The United States is pulled into World War II in December of 1941, the first attack on American soil since the War of 1812. The event unites the country overnight in what will be the most widespread war and deadliest conflict in human history. The War Department quickly looks to establish bases out west to support the Pacific Theater. It sends an officer out to investigate 3 potential sites in Washington state: Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane. The first city to come up with $10,000 will get the project. On his train ride back to Washington, D.C., the officer receives a telegram from Spokane saying the money is in hand and a small parcel of land on the West Plains is secured. Spokane gets the base.
Once the designation was made, the chamber and the business community raised $125,000 more and bought 1,400 acres and gave it to the War Department. And then the appropriation came from the federal government for $14 million to buy the rest of it, which is now 4,500 acres. That belongs to the Air Force as Fairchild Air Force Base. And I think that maybe they didn't know how fast that was going to happen, and they didn't know ultimately what it was going to be, because we really didn't know how critical aviation would be in future conflicts. But I think certainly they took a good step.
Fairchild Air Force Base today provides global reach for our military, flying the KC-135 tanker. The base is also host to the U.S. Air Force Survival School and the Washington Air National Guard. Its annual economic impact on the region is about $500 million, a very large return on a very small local investment in real estate.
I can't even imagine Spokane without Fairchild Air Force Base. I don't think most people that have been here a lot longer than me would either. It is so much of who we are, and part of that is the obvious. It's a big tract of land, big real estate, has the largest single employment site with about 5,500 people there, active duty and civilian. It's hard to miss the airplanes. We have somewhere around 20,000 military retirees here. And so they're really, the Air Force has really become a part of the fabric of this region.
The Great Pacific Northwest begins right here.
World's Fair 74.
Spokane, Washington, site of the World Environmental Fair.
Spokane is the smallest city ever to host a World's Fair when it welcomes the world in 1974. It is the first exposition with an environmental theme, celebrating tomorrow's fresh, new environment.
At 12 noon on this day, acting in my capacity as President of the United States, it is my high honor and privilege to declare Expo 74 officially open to all the citizens of the world.
The seed for Expo 74 is planted in 1959 when business leaders formed Spokane Unlimited to reclaim downtown Spokane, lost to suburbanization and industrial development. With leadership from the Spokane Association of Realtors, the group purchases Havermale Island in the middle of the Spokane River as the focus of a downtown makeover. Cleaning up downtown Spokane is twinned with a celebration of the city's centennial, and leaders begin to dream of something big.
I wasn't thinking of World's Fair. I was thinking of something that would be a regional, at least in attraction, national in scope as far as a theme and so forth, and that would be able to attract outside money. The reason that the World's Fair appealed to me was that if we could pull it off, was that it would do things for the community that you didn't have to do that you couldn't do for yourself. It would bring people into the community who would spend money, and some of that would be left in residual benefits in physical construction, and it would bring attention to the community in a way that only large cities can do.
Expo 74 attracts 10 nations and more than 5 million guests. The event leaves Spokane with an opera house, convention center, a 100-acre urban riverfront park, and $150 million in the local economy.
To see what happened with Expo for the city of Spokane, for our community, how it transformed that whole area is still something even today. These many years later, I still pinch myself and think about, now that's where this used to be, and look at it now.
Small real estate gems, too, define who we are in Spokane. For example, 100 years ago, a young boy in this house opens the Spokesman Review newspaper every morning before going to school and laughs at the stories in the Bingville Bugle. The lad so identifies with the make-believe characters that his family gives him the nickname, Bing. You hear his most famous recording every December. The White Christmases, just like the ones I used to know, are celebrated here in the Gonzaga University Alumni House, the childhood home of Bing Crosby.
Just like the ones I used to know.
You likely do not know the first people to live in this house, Mr. and Mrs. Bruce and Sonora Dodd. You likely do, though, celebrate the national holiday which Mrs. Dodd invents in 1910. She is the mother of Father's Day. Since a national holiday originates here, this is the only private residence in Spokane that is a National Historic Landmark.
It qualifies because of the lady that lived here, that she and her husband built the house. Sonora Smart Dodd and John Bruce Dodd built this house in 1913, and this was just after she had founded Father's Day in Spokane. And through her pursuit of founding Father's Day in Spokane, that spread to the state, that spread to national, and spread to worldwide significance, the house that Sonora lived in is very famous.
Shakespeare says, "Past is prologue." As we look back on a century of development in Spokane, we see our future too. Here is a community that is small enough and big enough to get things done. Tomorrow will be a good morning again in Spokane.
I think Spokane's going to be a booming community. And why do I think that? Well, we've got all the baby boomers, people reaching age, they need to sell the houses they're in right now. Maybe they had a whole family or something. Now they're down to 2 people. They need a smaller house. The economy is, you know, they're not going to get the retirement they thought, so they need to live a little smaller. Another major thing that I see, look at all the natural disasters going on. You know, it's going to get more and more. You're going to have more and more disasters. This is a stable community. We don't have hurricanes here. We have some strong winds sometimes. We don't have floods. We're a very stable community. This is a desirable community to live in. So those are the two main factors that I see that's going to make real estate go in Spokane.
The Spokane Association of Realtors turns 100 years old this year. To celebrate this milestone, its members return to the room in which it begins, the Hall of the Doges of the Davenport Hotel, a signature piece of Spokane real estate. Many things will change in Spokane in the next 100 years, but one thing is certain: real estate men and women will continue to define our city because, history tells us, under all is the land. I'm Tom MacArthur. Happy Centennial, Spokane Association of Realtors.